and I'll also use that for attendance. But so great to partner with you guys. Thank you.
Eli, it is a pleasure. We are really looking forward to it.
And my name is Braden. I'm account executive here at Extempore, and have been working a little bit with Eli and have had some chats with Elena as well. And I'm really excited about this opportunity and to provide the presentation. Grant will be the main one leading it. I'll be trying to man the chat and jump in and with questions and help as people have questions along the way. But thank you all again for joining us, and I'll let Grant take it from here.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you guys so much. My name is Grant Kastner. I'm Extempore's community manager, and welcome to a webinar on integrated performance assessments. So I am not only Extempore's community manager, where I do all sorts of our blogs and teacher connection stuff and things like this, like webinars, but I'm also a Chinese teacher like you guys. Or no, a language teacher like you guys, where I teach Chinese, at St. Michael Albertville High School in Albertville, Minnesota. So it is great to talk to you all. And just a little reminder, we are in Central Time right now. Our bell is going to ring at 3:20, so 4:20 for you all. So just giving you that little heads up before it happens. It's great to hear from you all. We have a lot of languages represented. We have Spanish, we have French, we have Japanese. It's just so great. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this information about IPAs. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So I want to do a little bit, just a little introduction, some session objectives, and talk about what we're going to do today. So my background, like I said, I'm Extempore's community manager. I teach Chinese. I've been teaching high school Chinese for about 4 years. And then what we're going to do today is talk all about IPA. So what is an IPA? We'll look at that. We'll break it down, right? And then we'll talk about why we should use IPAs in our classroom, right? Why we should use integrated performance assessments. And then, so from the first half will be a bit about, talking about IPAs and everything we need to know about them. The second part of the webinar will be more of putting these IPAs together, constructing them, and then assessing with IPAs on the Extempore platform. So, and then we'll see a demonstration of assessment creation, so making those assessments, and then we'll see completing those assessments, so the student side of completing the assessments. And finally, of course, we will have time for a Q&A. And I just want to let you know, it's a webinar, I know, but please ask questions. Braden is going to man the chat during this session. And if you have any questions at any time, he'll be able to answer them, whether it's about Extempore. If it's more language related or, about IPAs, then he can share that question with me. But please don't feel like you can't voice a question when it comes up. I'd be happy to answer them as they do. So please, like I said, feel free. All right, let's get into it. IPAs, let's do a little bit of a quick poll. What do you know? Do you know anything about IPAs? What are you curious about learning today? What do you want to learn today in this session? I'm just curious to see where we're coming from. What are our backgrounds with IPAs? Yeah, so feel free to share in the chat. Salut, Casey. Hola, Star. What are we curious to know? What do we already know about IPAs? Cynthia says a more current real-life way to assess students. That is a fantastic description of what an IPA is. To put it in very, very short terms, that's a great way. Nikki says, I like how IPAs allow students to use language in a real way. Yeah, absolutely. Again, real world. We both comment, it's real. Irase, is that correct? I think. New strategies to teach foreign languages, a basic knowledge about what they are. We had to push to use them several years ago. Well, maybe this will rejuvenate that push again. Any others? I know for me, the big thing is, like, it sounds really obvious, and I'll be emphasizing this a lot, but all three words: integrated performance assessment. Oh, learning about how to use them if different in an immersion class. That's interesting. It's all three things, right? It's you integrate different things. It's all around a theme. And it's a performance assessment. It's not just a textbook test. It's something that they actually have to do. Does it differ greatly from what many of us actual informed teachers do? Well, Stephen, I think that's a big question. I don't think I'll be able to answer that fully right now. Catherine asks, I am curious to use them with my very novice learners. Yeah, that's also a bit of a tricky point. Great. This is a lot of good questions, a lot of good conversation to talk about already. So let's see, where do we start with IPAs? IPAs 101, integrated performance assessment. This is taken from Actable. The integrated performance assessment, IPA, is a cluster assessment featuring 3 tasks, each of which reflects one of the 3 modes of communication, right? So we know our 3 modes: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational, right? So you can see this chart, infographic, that shows the outline of an IPA. Interpretive tasks, you have reading, listening, and then it goes to you get feedback on those tasks. Then you complete interpersonal tasks and presentational tasks, right? So we know the 3 modes of communication: interpretive, taking something in; interpersonal, talking to someone else; and then presentational, where we produce, or the students produce language for an audience, whether that's text-based or written-based. So we're going to come back to this, but you'll see right in the middle is the topic, right? That's the integrated piece. It all surrounds one topic. So it might be about the weather. It might be about food. It might be about hobbies. It might be about things you do at school. It might be about, I don't know, places you go on vacation. It might be about things you do to help out in the community, right? There is a centered topic with integrated performance assessments, hence the word integrated, right? They all revolve around some theme. Continuing this quote, continued. The 3 tasks are aligned within a single theme or content area, reflecting the manner in which students naturally acquire and use the language in the real world or the classroom, right? We had some comments that even mentioned it's real. It's things that people really do in their real life assessments. Each task provides the information and elicits the linguistic interaction that is necessary for students to complete the subsequent tasks. Right. So you have an interpreted task. You might say, interpret the weather forecast and think about what you want to do. Right. And so instead of saying, hey, you need to use this tense 4 times. No, you have a task that causes them to do, that causes the students, or elicits that response, that language from the student, instead of saying you need to do this. And then they take that information from, say, it's step 1, and they take it to step 3, the interpersonal task. And then they take both what they did in step 1 and step 3 into number 4, the presentational task. And that's the culmination of it. So that's IPAs 101. You have integrated, it's performance-based, and it's an assessment all around one theme. Why? Why though? Why should we do IPAs? We saw a few comments earlier. Let's look at a few more reasons. Real world tasks, right? We've already mentioned real world tasks, but who doesn't want to do things in the real world? Mr. Kastner, when are we going to actually use this? Fortunately, I don't have a lot of my students actually asking me that, because I like to make things real world, right? And so when you use IPAs, when they are based on things you actually do in real life, the relevance is right there, right? And the students have that immediate connection, as opposed to just a basic paper, front and back of a paper conjugation assessment or something like that. So real world, right? They're real world. Number 2, integrating all 3 modes of communication. I've said this, right? You have the interpersonal mode, you have the interpretive mode, you have presentation, all together, all in one. It's great. Authentic resources. Haven't talked about that yet, but when you have, particularly in the interpretive portion, you are able to use authentic resources that students will see in the target language or in the target culture to, assess themselves on that task, right? Whether it's a weather forecast, whether it's a list of classes, whether it's a text message from someone or a radio podcast or a message that they got on Snapchat. I don't know, but they're all authentic resources that you can use. That's another reason to use IPAs. And they're customizable for almost all levels, right? So you can really differentiate and modify your assessment, whether it's the interpretive mode, whether it's the interpersonal mode, and whether it's the presentation mode, for whatever level that your students are at. But I do want to preface this by saying that we had, I can't remember the name, but we had someone ask about doing IPAs with really low level students. I don't want to say that it's possible, right? I never want to say that it's, you should never try this, but I give caution, because you want to make sure the students feel comfortable enough with the language that they can produce what is needed and that they can interpret what they need to interpret. If you have a group of novice low or novice mid students, I don't think I would be a bit hesitant, at least, especially teaching Chinese, to say, hey, let's do an IPA, and then they get really, really overwhelmed. I saw a hand raise. Was that, I believe, Catherine? I don't know if I can see this from the Zoom. I got a little notification though. Something in the chat. Let's see. Oh, it was an accident. No, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Don't feel bad about that. That's not a problem. Yeah, but just like I said, think about your students' level. I mean, it's like giving an advanced task to a group of intermediate students, right? You want to make sure that what you're having them do is in line with where their level is at that time. That's all. And finally, it's authentic, right? This is about as authentic as it gets. Real world tasks, putting it all together It's like the home run of language teaching assessments. Awesome. So here we have why IPAs. Let's run through these real quick. Real world tasks, you integrate all three modes. You use authentic resources. They're very customizable and very differentiatable. I don't know. You can really do whatever you want with them. And they're very authentic as well. So we've talked about that. We've talked about why. We've learned about what IPAs are. Well, let's talk about the how. Let's make an IPA. Part one, we start from the end. Similar to backwards design, I have to think a lot of you are probably familiar with backwards design. What do you want to do? What you want your students to be able to do at the end, right? IPAs are integrated. So we have to remember that every step that we have, we are combining everything that is done. So starting with the final product, presentational writing, speaking, what products do you want your students to produce from an assignment? So for me, I had some examples. For example, a final task for a school unit, write a blog post where you make suggestions, on what classes someone should take in China and say why, right? That's the final task. Now, there are a lot of things that students have to do before they can write that blog post. They have to talk to people. They have to listen. They have to get the vocabulary, right? That's why this is an assessment. It's not just students walk in one day and you say, okay, hey, write a blog post. They can't do that, right? There are steps that you have to take to get them there. And so the very, very final part of this assessment is saying, okay, once we've done the interpretive and the interpersonal, then you're going to write a blog post. So with that in mind, then we can look at, okay, what's our interpretive section? What are they going to interpret in the first step of the IPA? What information could students interpret about this topic that they could then use in the presentational mode, right? So if we back up, what's the presentational task? Write a blog post where you make suggestions of what classes someone could take in China. So for this, I look at universities in China. So the example that I have for this is schedule/course offerings found online from famous Chinese universities. For example, Beijing University, Tsinghua University, two of the biggest universities in all of China, and two of the most prestigious too. So we'll see on the example that I have on Extempore, you'll see list of course offerings and majors in Chinese that these institutions offer at their schools. And so the student will look at those and they'll have to, whatever the task says, we don't know the task just yet, but you can customize that however you want. You could say, what major would you pick? What do you think are the most popular majors, right? But just by having them interpret what they see on the source, okay? So again, the example here is scheduling course offerings found online from famous Chinese universities, and students are interpreting the target language and then completing a task with that language. So there's part two, interpretive listening and reading. Oh, and just for the sake of time, I only included a reading assessment here, but you can also have a listening assessment too, where you add in something about, say you hear a conversation about people talking about classes or classes they like and don't like, something like that, right? But that is the interpretive section. Moving on, we have interpersonal. What information can students acquire from their peers, interpersonal, about this topic? For example, mine, what are our peers' academic interests? What majors do they value/not value? So that's the third part. That's the interpersonal portion of it. So now they've done the interpretive. Now they're going, okay, interpersonal. I need to get information from my peers about something. So I asked my peers in Chinese. I know how to ask these questions. Hey, what are you interested in? What do you like to study? What classes do you like? What are you looking to major in the future? Why or why not? So that's the interpersonal, right? They're getting more information, right? So step one, interpretive, they acquired information from an authentic resource. Interpersonal, they're acquiring information from their peers. They're talking to one another. That's the second mode of communication. So once we've done, I'm going to back up. Once we've done interpretive, then we do interpersonal. We talk to our peers. Then we put the IPA together. We can see where this goes. Interpretive task to acquire information. Then look at the course offerings. Interpersonal task, you talk to one another. Finally, presentational task, right? Once they've done 1 and 2, they take their acquired information in both the interpretive task and the interpersonal task, and they use the information to complete a task, which would be writing a blog post. Right? So interpretive, they're taking something in, they're listening or reading to something, listening and reading to something. Impersonal, they're talking to their peers. Presentational, they're taking that all and putting it together and producing something with that language. I'm going to stop for about a minute. I've talked for a bit. Any questions or comments about this sort of just the IPA, the assessment and the nature of it? I don't want to keep going. I'd love to have some feedback at this point. If not, you can share a good to go or a thumbs up or something in the chat. Thank you, Casey. Awesome. In terms of preparing students for writing, Stephen asked, do you use sentence builders? I do use sentence builders. It's another bit of a tangential conversation, one that I would love to discuss perhaps at the end of the presentation. Awesome. Thank you. Great. Good to know. Elena says, I feel like sometimes in my planning, I switch around 2 and 3. Sometimes students are more comfortable doing the rehearsed presentation before they try to use the new vocab in a conversation. Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, customizable, right? It's totally customizable. You can make the IPA really what you want it to be. All right. So coming back to this graphic, I just want to have us look at this again. We've talked about the steps of the IPA. Interpretive tasks, you do your reading and listening. You get feedback on that, so you know how you do. And then you take the information, use it and use it in an interpersonal task. And then you take 1 and 3 and you present that in a presentational task, right? So now we see the whole thing come together and there is a topic at the center of this. So now that I have run on and on and on about this, I'd love to hear from you. What are some task-based IPAs that come to mind for your classes? What would you want to do? What would be that center topic? And I'm sure our minds are churning and coming up with new ideas about all the ways that we could use IPAs, whether in novice or intermediate or advanced classes. So please feel free to share. I always talk about the school unit. I love talking about school. There's so many different cultural phenomena, both in China and Taiwan, to talk about. So it's always on my mind. I'm always thinking, oh, how can I make my school unit better? How can I make my school unit better? But please, I'd love to hear what you guys have to share in the chat. Starts as a conversation at a restaurant. Okay, so what I would say to that, my tip would be, what is the task at the restaurant? Is it to order food? Is it to make a suggestion to someone about food? Right? They might be interpreting a menu and then conversing with someone, interpersonal conversation about what to order, and then maybe presenting what they could order. That could be a very, very basic IPA. And then so the interpretive could be reading, and then the listening interpretive could be listening to a waiter, like, oh, what are the specials or something like that. Casey says, if you don't mind me reading your response, Casey, teach in elementary. We have a similar topic when we discuss school, although I don't think kids could prepare a blog post. I do think they could discuss their favorite classes. Yeah, of course, right? And choose a middle school based on course hours. Sure, exactly. That it could exactly be an IPA. Stephen says, attempt an IPA in an intermediate Spanish class on cities, places to visit, and why. Sure. Elena's talking about working on rebuilding a travel unit. Cynthia's struggling to come up with an assessment on present tense verbs and conjugations based besides the traditional paper test, right? So my advice for that would be, okay, well, what is the situation when they use present tense verbs? I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did take Spanish. I think a lot of present tense verbs, we use them when we talk about like routines, what you do in the morning, what you do on a daily basis, right? First in the morning, I go to school, then I come home and I eat lunch, and then I go to a friend's house and study. Think about no, school's out. Told you. There we are. What situations do students use those verbs in, right? So it's not so much telling them what they have to do, but creating a situation where you use the present tense. Activities that you like to do. Thank you, Amy. Any others? Take another 20 seconds. Then now. Yeah, these are great. These are some really good suggestions. It's about remembering when it comes to the IPA. I'm gonna back up a slide. The theme, right? Keeping it within a theme, and then thinking about my suggestion with the presentation. What do you want your students to produce eventually? And then what interpretive tasks and what interpersonal tasks are going to help them create that presentation, create that product, whether it's written or spoken. Okay, well, without further ado, we've been talking about IPAs. We've talked about there's a topic, there's the 3 modes of communication. You have to create authentic tasks. There's all sorts of things that go into IPAs. Stephen says it seems that an IPA, the focus is communicational. Absolutely, right? It's communicative language teacher. The focus is sending and receiving a message. Do you understand the message? That's interpretive. And then interpersonal is both giving a message and receiving a message. And then presentational, can you produce that message? Sure, you can have focuses on grammar points, that's fine. But the goal of language, as we all know, is to send a message, right? And you can make grammatical error, see what I did there, and you can still be comprehensible, right? Obviously, you want to limit those errors, sure. But you still, the goal is to produce a message. And if students can complete that and present something either in written or spoken form, they've completed the task, right? It's all about looking at that task in the middle and saying, okay, has the student completed this task? Has the student written a blog post? Have they said where they want to go? Have they said what major they want to take or what they want to study and why? If they've done that, then it's comprehensible. And if their language prohibits them from doing that, well, then it's not comprehensible. And then you know where the line is drawn. All right, lots of great discussion, lots to talk about IPAs. I hope you guys have a good understanding of this now. And now we're going to talk about creating IPAs and assessing on Extempore. So Extempore, for those of you who may or may not know, I'm going to jump over here. We go to manage classes. Extempore is a platform where it is an assessment platform where you can create all sorts of assessments that you need to assess interpretively. You can assess interpersonal, you can assess speaking, you can assess reading, you can assess writing, listening, all 4 skills and all 3 modes of communication. So what we're going to do in this second half of the presentation is look at creating classes on Extempore, creating assessments, and then creating or assessing with an IPA on Extempore. So I have an IPA that I am ready to do. You can't see my screen though, because I'm not sharing. 1 second. I have an IPA that I am ready to do, and I will show you all once we create a few assessments on the platform. So I'm just going to give you a brief little demo of the platform, and then I will show you what it looks like to complete an assessment from the student's perspective on the platform. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to create a class. So within Extempore, you can create a class, and we're going to call it JCPS IPA class. We'll call it English, and we can start from scratch. Great. Then we start here. And so now I have a class. I'll hit save class. So now I have my class, and I can create, where to go? Towards the bottom, probably. I can create my first assessment. So I have my class. I'm going to create an assessment. All right. So with the assessment, I can say, okay, we call it basic introductions. I have a start time, assessment timeline. When does the assessment start? When is the assessment due? I'll say it's due next Saturday. Assessment type, we have group assessments and individual assessments. You'll see what a group assessment looks like. There are two examples of group assessments. We have synchronous rooms, which is just like a Zoom breakout room, and it records, and then the teacher can give unique feedback to each student, up to 4. And then asynchronous rooms, which is kind of just like a chat room, except you're sending audio messages to one another. And you can drag the little bar to determine how many students you want per room. But for this sake, we're going to keep it with individual assessments. So in this very, very basic introductory task, the student will respond with audio. And then we can look down and we can see there's some extra details we can add. You can add a description, introduce yourself in the target language. And you can determine when students see grades. So when you publish grades, which would allow you to grade all of them first and then submit to publish the grades so that students couldn't see, student A's feedback before student B. Or while I'm grading, which would be as soon as you hit the submit button on the feedback, which we will see, the student would see that feedback. Randomized questions, pretty self-explanatory, it mixes them all up. Providing a numeric score, another great thing about Extempore is that you can add your own rubric. You can also save those rubric too. So say I create a new rubric, I'll say, okay, I'll call it vocabulary, and then use as appropriate words in the description. And then you can customize this however you want. You can try the slider and determine how many points you want that to be. And then when you're done with it, you can say, hey, I'm going to save this rubric so that the next time I've written all of these criteria and all of the description, and I don't have to do that anymore. And when I want it, I can just come up with I can go to this little drop-down menu, pick the rubric that I want, and then it populates right in there. So that's the rubric. I'm going to turn that off though. And then limitations, we're not going to look at it for this assessment, for the next one. What's really great about limitations that you can limit how much time students have. So limit time to review, how much time do they have to look at the assessment? Limit time to respond, how much time do they have to respond to the assessment? All right, so say it's 15 seconds to review and a minute to respond. And then as soon as you hit, I believe, limiting, that the allow re-record will turn off as well. So this is the basic introduction. This is the framework of the assessment. I have still not created the questions of the assessment, but this is just the basic framework of it. I need to fix one thing really quickly. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to share them. Or if do we have any questions, comments, or concerns about the sharing this right now? About creating assessments, excuse me. Okay, I'll take that as a no. All right, so like I said, this is the framework of the assessment. This is all of the details and things that are going on within the assessment. So now that I have the assessment framework created, I can click next. I can click next after I turn these off, of course. And I can start creating questions for the assessment. So we'll just call this one, and we'll say, introduce yourself in the target language, right? So the first thing that I wrote earlier was just a little description. You can leave that blank. This though, this is the target language, excuse me. This is the question text, which is what the student will see upon entering this question. So I'll click, I can do this, question title, question text, there I have it. And now I have a basic prompt. So I'll click next, and boom, my assessment is made. It's only got one question, but I can see the name of it. It's got a question. I can copy this assessment over. Say I make, like, people come up to me, oh, Mr. Kastner, your assessments are just amazing. Please share all of them with me. I say, okay, I can click the paper airplane icon, and I can click this link, send it over to a colleague or my principal or whoever, and then they can import that directly into their Extempore account as well. So that's very nice. So we have a very basic introduction assessments. I can look at it. That's nice is that once I create an assessment, I can view it as a student. And then once this page loads, I can see exactly what my students will see. I'll come down here, where'd it go? Here we go, JCPS IPA. I can come to this class, and then this is me from my teacher account looking at these as a student. So this is, you can see here, you can see this is the Extempore student portal. This is what the student sees when they log into Extempore on a desktop. We also have mobile apps, so they can do them from their Android, iPhone, iPad, whatever they're using to complete their assessments. So I'm going to jump in here and say, so basic introductions, this is the assessment I just made. And now I can see what this looks like for the student. So I'll click in and say, okay, introduce yourself in the target language, and I can record whenever I'm ready. So I click record, get a nice countdown, and I can record. Hi, my name is Grant. I'm 105 years old and I teach Chinese. I'll stop recording. Done. Submit attempt. If I'm happy with it, if I like it, if I wanted to, I can also play it back and say, oh, I'm not sure about that. I'm going to re-record it. Right. So the re-record button is still there. They can do it whenever they want. But I'm happy with it. I say, hey, this is really good. I hope my teacher likes it. I'm going to click submit, and I'm done. All of those questions have been answered. Right. So that's a very, very, very basic assessment. Because we have a question. Steven says, I'm guessing that the greatest strength of Extempore is that it provides key features of multiple platforms on a single platform. Sort of, kind of. I think I'll come back to that later. But it's a good comment. All right, so I've completed a basic introductions assessment. Now I want to say, okay, let's ramp this up a little bit. That was too easy. Let's make a high stakes assessment. You can see I've made many of them so far. I'm going to change the due date, and I'll say keep all of this the same. This is a high stakes assessment. Good luck. You are going to need it. Right, so there's my description. Right? You don't have to go to the description, but that's what the student will see before joining the assessment. Right, so I'm gonna keep these the same, but now I have limitations. So I'll say, okay, limitations. Student only has 15 seconds to review the question, and they have 30 seconds to respond to their question. So now it's really going to be high stakes. They can only see it once, and we'll see what that looks like from the student side when they have these timers. So I'll click next. I have my framework set. And again, now I've made the framework of the assessment. I can create questions now for that assessment. So we'll just call this number 1 again. Question, text. So look at the weather forecast and decide what to do this weekend. So you can see here, I didn't talk about these before, but now I have my question, text, and media prompts. You can add your own file. You can add an image, which is what I will do here. Where'd they go? Documents, images. It is a beautiful 52 degrees here in Minneapolis. No, I'm kidding. It's -1 right now. But I wish. But you have the weather file right there. You can see the forecast. This is what the student will see. If I wanted to, I could add my own video. Hey there. I could also add my own audio file attached to this. And so you can combine different types of files. So if I have an image here, I can add an audio file that might say, hey, you want to hang out with a friend this weekend, look at the weather forecast, and then listen to what your friend says. And your friend says, oh, well, I'm free Saturday morning, but I'm busy Sunday night, and then decide what you want to do. Right. So it's about, you can sort of overload the input that they have. But I'll keep it like this, have my prompts, have my picture here, the weather, and I'll click next. And voila, my assessment is made. So high stakes assessment, all good to go. I'm going to click view a student again. Take me here, find my class. Your page really won't look like what you're about to see with like the million classes, because I do all sorts of classes working here. You'll probably only have like 2 or 3. But I'm going to go up here, find my class. Now I have high stakes assessment ready for me. So I click in, I see the description, I see one question tile waiting for me. This is a high stakes assessment. Good luck. You're going to, oh boy, I'm scared. This is going to be bad. So made my assessment. Now I'm ready to do it. So I click the tile that says, hey, this is a lockable question. You have 15 seconds to review it, and you only have 30 seconds to respond. This question will only allow a single attempt. Would you like to start now? And as a student, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really stressful. I don't know what's going to happen. But they see it, right? They see the parameters, and they say, okay, I only have this much time. What lockable means is that if they close their tab, if they X out of their browser, if they click the back button, anything like that, it will lock them out of their question, right? They will not be permitted to re-enter and try to do the question again. So I say, okay, I see this. I'm good to go. I'm ready to join. So I click OK. And you'll see, I don't know where my weather forecast is. It should be there. You'll see that the timer starts to count down right away. And once it hits 0, you'll have a nice little 3, 2, 1. And then this guy will start here, the timer. So you see the countdown. You'll also see this thing at the top. It's going to start recording right away, but I'm going to keep talking. Your teacher will be notified each time you click away from this page or open a new tab. So what that means, these are called navigation warnings. So I have my timer right here. And then they'll say, okay, I want to look at something real quick. Maybe something Google Translate. Then I come back and it says, oh, hey, whoa, you left the page. You can't do that. So this is just one of our safeguards. And then the teacher student has to click. And then they say, okay. And now the timer keeps going like, oh my God, I'm out of time. So I stop recording. I have my response. I didn't really say what I wanted to do this weekend. Oh, well. And I click submit. So those are 2 very, very, very basic, one, the basic introduction, the other, a high stakes assessment that you can do on the platform. Before I get to looking at what an IPA assessment looks like on Extempore, again, I'd love to hear any questions that you may have about what you just saw before we look at the last part. We have a question. Casey says, I'm curious to know what level of tech you use on the daily. Is this just an assessment feature? Do you incorporate it regularly? I'm not too sure if I understand what you're asking. I use Extempore quite frequently with my classes. The assessment, so how do I put this? Extempore is designed to be an assessment platform, but it is not limited to assessments. You can use it for dozens of other different things that I have written about in our blogs and have done other webinars on. I think, Casey, that might be a question that I can elaborate a bit more on when we finish. Right. Okay. We'll come back to that. Okay. I'm gonna just change my sharing. Let's see. I don't want to share this anymore. I want to share something else. Oh, here we go. Extempore class. Okay. I have switched over to another window. You should now see extempore class. It's got a little gray box because I'm in incognito. This is what it looks like to do an IPA and extempore. You'll notice it's the exact same thing. I just have 3 different prompts. So now that you've seen how an assessment can be created on extempore, it'll make a bit more sense when we look at the IPAs, which will feature 3 things. Part 1, the interpretive, right? And then part 2, interpersonal. And this is the interpersonal sync. No one's going to be with me, but you'll see exactly what that looks like when students join into rooms and they can talk to their peers. And there will be a task for them to complete. And then finally, a basic presentational task for the to sum up that IPA. Okay, let's look at part 1, interpretive. So as you'll know, interpretive, they are interpreting something. They are looking at an authentic resource. So both of these are the same. I'm going to click in one. I have to write a response. So this question says, 你觉得在北大上大学的人一般喜欢上什么样的课? What classes do people like to take at 北大, at Beijing University, and why? So I can see the classes here, a little tiny. You can zoom in. And I can see, okay, there's a list of classes: information technology, there's sociology, there's the, what do you call that? The humanities, and there's, Chinese history and language and arts and all sorts of stuff. So I say, okay, I think, and this could be, they could respond, I would rather have them respond in Mandarin, but you can type out your response here. I think they like to take humanities classes. Take time, I'm going to type English. So I have that, there's their response, and they have, you'll see I haven't set timers or anything like that. You can, if you want it to be super authentic, but I don't, for me, I wouldn't want to put too much pressure on my students. I'd want them to feel comfortable. But if you feel your students are ready for that, then you can do it. So I'll click submit. So I'm done. And then the same thing below, except this is for Tsinghua University, not Beijing University. So see the prompt, this is the authentic resource. I just pulled a screenshot from their website. And then the student can respond to the prompts here. It's the same question. So what classes do you think people at Tsinghua like to take? So I'll type in something, response, let's submit. And now you'll see, once I've completed that first one, that assessment goes to this completed folder, right? So it's not even active anymore because the student has submitted both, has submitted responses to both questions. So now I'm ready for part 2, the interpersonal part of the IPA. So I'll say, okay, I'm gonna jump in. Now, though, you see me again, right? This is the synchronous room task preview. So it's synchronous, exact same time that other students are with me. Now, I don't have any partners here because I have not been assigned one. Normally, as a teacher, you can move students around and say, okay, I want Johnny with Kelly. I want Trayvon with Jessica, whatever. Whoever is joining, you can mix that up. But I am here. I can go to my room, and students will see how this works, and there's troubleshooting. But I'm going to click go to room, and I'm going to go. And I join in, and as soon as I join in the room, you can see me here. I'm going to mute myself in here. The recording starts. You can see how much time I have up here, and then the task. In Chinese, talk about what classes you take and what you like to major in when you go to college. Talk about why you like certain classes and what you're interested in. So as the students are talking, right, they are receiving information from their peers, and they are sharing information with their peers that they are going to eventually use in the presentational task. But this is what the room looks like, right? I would be here if I had a partner, whether it was Braden or anybody else, they would be here. And you can have up to 4 people in a room at once. And then they can talk to each other. And this room gets recorded the whole way. You'll see this here. It's all recording. And then the room closes in 10 minutes. But all done with that. When I'm done and I'm happy, I can click submit. And that goes there. Now, you might ask, well, Mr. Kastner, why isn't part 2 going into the completed section? And the simple answer is that with the interpersonal rooms, it takes just a little bit of time to process, maybe 5 or 6 minutes. And then once that has processed, it goes to the completed folder. That's all. So I've done my interpretive. I looked at classes I wanted to take. I've done the interpersonal. I talked to myself about majors and things that I'm interested in. Now I'm ready to take that information and put it into the presentational. So now it says, okay, use what you learned in part 1 and part 2 to complete the presentational writing portion. So I say, okay, I click in, choose my language, and then I have my response. And just like that, I can complete the assessment. Based on part 1 and part 2, compose a brief blog post where you give advice on what school people should attend and why, or what classes they should take. Anything you want to do. It's a task, right? Also suggest a major degree of study for them to pursue at that institution and why you suggest that. Again, if you wanted, you could put parameters on this. You could give them 10 seconds to prepare, 8 minutes to respond, right? It's up to you how you want to modify this, which is what's great about IPAs overall. I think people should go to you because they have a good program in fishing. I don't know. So I'm done. Here's my response. Students can type out their response here. They can do this on their phone, and I'll click submit. And I'm done that assessment. So you'll see that the one thing that I want to note before I take questions is that these are 3 different assessments, right? The interpretive part was one assessment. The interpersonal part was another assessment. The third part was a different assessment as well. And that's just for the sake of organization on Extempore. I have pushed, and we are thinking and putting and coming up with ways to create, like, make an IPA on Extempore. But for the time being, just creating different assessments is the easiest way to go about it. I do want to show what grading looks like, but I've also talked a lot, and we've almost hit 45 minutes. And I'd really, really love to just take some questions and have a discussion. Eli, if that's okay. I'm sure if there is greater interest, we can hold another demo at another time. I can give more details about the platform. Sure. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing now and just open up the floor, take questions, comments, anything you guys have. And let's see if I can catch up to all of these. Elena says, I like that you can access a recording of the entire conversation rather than only being able to hear. Yeah, that's really the best part about Sync, is that you have the entire recording in the palm of your hands, right? Once it processes that recording between whether it's 2 students, 3 students, 4 students, right there, and you can listen to the whole thing. And students can listen to it too. Irase, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think here in JCPS, we need more time to practice. Of course, is Extempore willing to get one-to-one with us? What do you think, Braden?
I would say yes. So what I'm here now is a link where we have set up a free account for JCPS teachers. And this link here will take you to a page where you can create an Extempore account, and then you'll try the platform out. And upon creating your account, there will be a kind of a interactive training tool. So it might take about 5 to 10 minutes to go through that helps you get acclimated to it. I advise going through that because it helps you just get up to speed and learn the basics for it as well. But in addition to that, I'll also include a link to my calendar. We touched on just some of the very basics of Extempore today. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about all the different things that you can do, or just some basic consultation on how to leverage it better in your classroom, would be happy to chat with you for one-off discussions to do so. So here's a link to book time with me.
Braden, how long do they have the trial for?
I have them lined up towards to the end of May.
Wow. Whole year.
Semester.
This guy, what generous, man.
Well, we'll see how it goes as things start out. But as Rossi had mentioned, it takes a little bit of time just to, as you start to develop it, and to get the most out of it when you go into the throughout the year. They want you to be able to have the time to explore and try different things, and then really get the most out of the tool. And so we'll be here along the way. Feel free to book time. We may, if there's enough interest, we could do a dedicated training session specific to Extempore for teachers who are interested in trying it out.
Yeah, exactly. And just to piggyback off what Braden said, I'm always available too. I am sort of the resident teacher of Extempore, and I'm happy to give, whether it's one-to-one or group teaching, group training on the product as well. That's what I do as community manager. Other questions, comments, IPAs, Extempore, anything, please.
Costs for the district after May. It depends. So our pricing structure is based on a per student basis. And so depending on the number of instructors and students that would be coming in and using it would vary. And it is a tiered approach. The more students that are using it, the cheaper it is per student as well. And then working through I think we'd be putting together some sort of special package with you guys because of the work we've been able to do with Eli and the webinar and presentations to try and get the most out of the relationship rather than just a tool, but being able to provide you with sessions, webinars like this for professional development and training and so on. So. Happy to help.
I might just jump in, guys, and just reiterate there on at least the JCPS side. So our software, and I know I've talked to both of you guys about this, but the software approval process in JCPS is can be a slow churning cog wheel. And so just for the teachers out there, for you guys to know that we've submitted information to the software approval process. I'll keep checking in on it regularly. And then also to Stephen's question too, if we get a lot of interest here and especially over the next couple months, it's so gracious of them to offer, for us to explore and kind of learn and figure out if this is a really good fit. We can always put in a budget request to help offset the cost too. And we'll be working with their team to work on numbers. So.
Thank you, Eli. And we will be following up at the end of this as well to provide a recording of the presentation to refer back to it, as well as these links again here that we've left in the chat, and of course your certificate of attendance too.
Casey says, I know classroom teachers are quite happy with the world language teachers contributing to the JCPS backpack. Not 100% sure what that is. Eli, perhaps you can clarify that. Would this kind of assessment be able to be placed in a Google style portfolio? Casey,
we have an integration with Google Classroom.
Right.
We can incorporate.
I think what I would say about this, if you're looking about a portfolio, the whole completed section really is the portfolio of the student's work. And one other good thing about it is that you can download student responses and put them somewhere else, right? If you want to collect their information and put it, in another place, you can absolutely download that and then keep track of the progress in that way. And in other trainings, we can also show you how you can measure progress with the platform. And then the other thing that I will say is that we are working on finalizing a portfolio feature where it would literally track students from the second that they entered the class, whether it was at level 1, level 2, level 3, and to however far they had gone in the class, right? And doing assessments on the platform and then comparing their progress, say from early August to the end of June, or September of their freshman year to May of their junior year, right? And that's what the portfolio feature.
And then along in their portfolio is just the ability for the teacher to be able to provide feedback to students as well. So something that they can refer back to, seeing them at the beginning of the year, they get the feedback from the teacher and inline feedback. So at 10 seconds into the video, the teacher can provide feedback towards a specific section of their submission, and then using that to help improve and prepare for future assessments as well.
Rachel asks, can a teacher create assessments together like with Google Slides/Forms? I'm not. What I would say is if you have certain recordings or pictures that you want to use, those can obviously be integrated into the assessment. You just upload a file, whether it's a video of you recording or just a straight image. That would maybe be an answer. I'm not 100% what you mean about that.
Grant and Braden, I'll just jump in really quick while they may be asking some more questions. So our district, and we hadn't talked about this yet, but our district does a backpack of defense skills. And so every grade is encouraged to, but there are transition points in 5th grade, 8th grade, and then senior year. So they actually do a student defense of learning that's in front of a panel. And so I think that's where Casey's question towards the backpack was. And so, yeah, I think that this is a very natural fit for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. If it's students showing evidence of their learning, absolutely. Yeah. Perfect fit. A defense. Wow. That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'll send you guys some stuff on Friday or Monday. Just an outline of what the backpack is. They've got some really nice publications on it. There are success skills. It's a big initiative in the district. It's been around, I guess, probably 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, that would be perfect. And I wanted to just add in, maybe other people are asking questions. There's a bunch in our follow-up email. I think I'll add, there's a bunch of other resources that we have, whether it's our task database or Extempore Commons or other external sources that I have on IPAs, and we'll share those with you as well. Whoa. Rachel, okay, yeah, I'm uploading the interpretive while my colleague uploads an interpersonal prompt. So so they are not editable at the same time, if that makes sense. Two people can't be making one assessment at once. It's all within one account. But the other thing is that if you could make the interpretive assessment, and then somebody else could create an interpersonal assessment, and you could share those assessments together. Does that make sense, right? So you could task, Spanish 1A teacher to do the interpretive, Spanish 1B to do interpersonal, Spanish 1C to do presentational, and then share those assessments with one another and just upload them into your account. And then every student that you have is doing the same assessment. So they're shareable. You just can't be creating the same assessment at once, not with in real time feedback, I think. Yeah, Elena, I'm not going to read your whole comment, but that's exactly what we're about, right? Assessments that can be accessed at any time, showing student mastery. That's what we have. Yeah, and the recordings are, it seems really simple, but when students can listen to their earlier recordings, like from 3 months ago, and then they think, I'm like, oh my gosh, Mr. Kastner, I've learned so much since then. I'm like, yeah, you did it. There's a really big feeling of accomplishment with that too. Just put my email in the chat, and I also want to share one other thing, which is our YouTube page, where we have all sorts of neat videos and webinars and breakdowns of things where you can learn more about the product and how it's used. So feel free you can contact me whenever you want, or just look at some of our videos that we have. And you can learn more about this. And I'll share a link to our blog. I'll share a link to the blog as well. Rachel asked about graphing student progress. Right now, no. Maybe in a few months, yes. That's the goal. Metrics. Every metric you can possibly think of, we want it. Speaking time, for at least for writing, I've been pushing and pushing and pushing. Word count, unique words, like that type of stuff would be really, really cool to see. Other thoughts, questions? I don't want to keep anybody too long. Like I said, I put our emails down there. Braden's is there. Mine is there. Resources, our blog, our YouTube page. Steven says, returning to Rachel's questions, many teachers have spent a lot of time creating assessments via Google tools. Will these be able to be integrated into Extempore? Not. Are you thinking about like taking a Google Forms assessment and then putting it into the platform? There's not. I don't know if there's a direct, integration for that available. You could just copy questions over. But yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Wonderful, Cynthia. Good to know. If that's all, like I said, I don't want to keep you all longer than I need to. I just thank you guys so much for coming and attending. It's been a pleasure to talk with all of you. I hope you all learned something about IPAs. I hope you all learned something about Extempore. And it was a pleasure. Hope to see you guys again, maybe even face to face. And And yeah, just thank you, Braden, Eli. Thanks for being here. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having us. All.
Thank you, Eli. And I will get the recording. I don't think I'll share the Zoom link. I'll probably just upload it to YouTube instead. It's a bit easier that way. And then I will share that with you as soon as I can. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop recording and we will see you around.